All right, so we're back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the big changes happening across all the big social media platforms. We've got Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snapchat, even TikTok. And I think it'll be really interesting to kind of dig in and see, how these platforms are trying to keep people on them, attract those advertisers, and also, give creators something to work with.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for all these platforms because it just seems like things are constantly evolving and changing so rapidly. And
Yeah.
they're really trying to figure out the balance between how do we keep users engaged and how do we keep, the business side of things going as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think one of the biggest things that kind of jumps out right away is that video seems to be everywhere. LinkedIn and YouTube are really pushing it hard.
Definitely. LinkedIn's own internal data has actually shown that watch time is up 36% year over year for video.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it is. And I think that plays into a lot of the trends that we're seeing across like just all digital media. Things like TikTok and Instagram Reels have really changed how people consume content. And that short form video style is just so engaging and so quick and easy to consume.
So are they basically just trying to give people what they want then?
Well, there is that. But remember, LinkedIn is also a very business centric platform. And so by really focusing on video, they're giving businesses more and more ways to reach their target audiences.
Right, because businesses pay to advertise on LinkedIn, so it's got to be good for business.
Exactly. And then you've got YouTube, which their revenue from video is actually growing even faster than Alphabet's overall revenue, which is their parent company.
Oh, wow. So video is really like their bread and butter right now.
Definitely. And what's even more interesting is it's not just traditional, videos. It's also things like podcasts. YouTube is actually the #1 platform for people listening to podcasts here in the U.S.
Really?
Yep. And they had over 400 million hours watched every single month just on living room devices alone last year.
I actually do that sometimes, especially when I'm looking for something very specific. I want to be able to scrub through, or if there's visuals that go with it, I'll definitely hop on YouTube to listen to a podcast.
Yeah, it really shows how versatile they are.
Yeah.
They've managed to really just keep changing and evolving as media changes and evolves itself.
So LinkedIn is leaning in, and YouTube is already there. It sounds like video is going to be sticking around for a while. And speaking of kind of taking cues from other platforms, LinkedIn is bringing that full-screen vertical video to desktop now, too, just like TikTok.
Yeah, and they're actually doing even more than that. They're testing a larger video display in the mobile app, and they've got this new thing. It's a mini view on your profile that highlights all of your video uploads.
Almost like they're making a play at TikTok, right?
Maybe. TikTok's success has really shown just how powerful short-form video is, and so it wouldn't be surprising to see other platforms want to get in on that.
I mean, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, they say. But moving on to Instagram, they are finally, after all these years, testing a feature that people have been asking for forever, which is to be able to rearrange the order of posts in your grid.
It's interesting that it's taken them this long, especially since they've been hinting at it since 2022.
I know.
So maybe they were, working out some technical kinks or just trying to figure out how to really implement it in a way that makes sense and is easy to use.
Well, good news is it looks like it's actually happening now. App researcher Alessandro Paluzzi actually found the edit grid option in the back-end code, so it seems like it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, and this is going to be big for a lot of people. Think about businesses and influencers who they really try to craft a very specific aesthetic or a story with their Instagram feed. Now they have, even more control over that presentation and how they want their content to look and feel to people.
Speaking of giving users control, Snapchat is doing something different. They're doing this new ad format. It's called Sponsored Snaps. Oreo's the first snack brand to try it out.
Yeah.
They're actually promoting their collaboration with Post Malone with these full-screen vertical videos that pop up right in your chat inbox.
Which is a pretty big deal because it's the first time a snack brand has used this type of ad. And Snapchat has got 453 million daily active users. So that's a direct line to a massive audience.
So you're just, scrolling through your chats and then bam, Post Malone is suddenly there trying to find the perfect Oreo.
It's definitely a creative approach, but it really shows how much innovation is happening in the digital ad space right now. Brands, they need to find new ways to really reach people, especially on a platform like Snapchat where people are already used to short, engaging content.
Okay, so now for something a little bit more on the serious side. Pinterest has actually listed attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a potential business risk. And they actually put this in their latest 10K filing. So this is pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, and what they're basically saying is they're concerned that their DEI efforts could be seen as not enough or too much. And that could lead to, backlash or even lawsuits and just damage their reputation overall.
This is kind of similar to what happened recently with Target, where they got sued by shareholders for not being upfront about the risks of their DEI initiatives.
Yeah, it's something we're seeing in a lot of different industries right now. Companies like Meta, Amazon, and Google, they've all had to scale back or even completely change their DEI programs because of all the pressure they're getting from both sides.
It's a really tough situation for companies because they're trying to do the right thing, but they're also worried about, upsetting investors or getting sued.
It's a tough balance for sure.
Speaking of tough situations, let's talk about TikTok and its very uncertain future here in the U.S. Snap CEO Evan Spiegel recently shared some concerns about their potential influence on the government. I mean, remember back in January 2025, TikTok briefly went offline because President Trump wanted to ban them?
Right. And then it got reinstated when he signed that executive order to delay it. But, the issue hasn't really gone away. And Spiegel's concern is that TikTok has already shown that they can influence the government and that potentially they could even undermine Congress or even the Supreme Court.
So what are some of the things that you think might actually determine what happens to TikTok?
Well, it's definitely going to depend on what the current administration decides to do.
Right. What about public opinion? Do you think that's going to matter?
Oh, for sure. You know how people feel about TikTok and how many people are using it and supporting it? All of that's definitely going to play a role in the decisions that get made by lawmakers and regulators.
So it seems like we'll just have to wait and see what happens with TikTok. But before we get too caught up in the what ifs, let's bring it back to what this all means for you, the listener. Because these changes, they aren't just happening out there in the ether. They actually affect how we all use these platforms and how creators try to reach us and how businesses are trying to reach us too.
Exactly. These trends are shaping the entire digital landscape that we all live in every single day.
Right. And like we were talking about earlier, the rise of video content is something you just can't ignore. Whether it's LinkedIn's full screen experience or the fact that so many people are watching podcasts on YouTube, short, engaging videos are just everywhere.
And it's not just about making any old video, it's about making really good content that your audience actually wants to watch. Think about those Oreo ads on Snapchat. They were funny, eye-catching, and they fit in perfectly with how people use Snapchat.
Yeah, you really got to stand out, especially when everything is moving so fast.
Yeah.
But it's not just about video. Instagram finally letting you rearrange your grid posts is a big deal too.
Absolutely. For people who really care about how their Instagram looks, businesses and influencers, this gives them so much more control over their brand and how they tell their story visually.
It's almost like they have their own little website now where they can show off their best stuff. And speaking of curating things online, how social media companies are handling diversity, equity, and inclusion is another really important thing to pay attention to.
It's a tricky situation for sure. And like we saw with Pinterest, companies are trying to find that balance between promoting DEI, but also not going too far and getting backlash or even sued.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk for sure. But for you, the listener, it's important to be informed and don't just take these companies at their word. Look at what they're actually doing and what their policies are.
Exactly. Hold them accountable. And then, of course, there's the whole TikTok situation, which just reminds us that, these platforms aren't just apps. They have a real impact on our lives. And the decisions that governments and these tech companies make, they affect how we all communicate and get information.
That's a lot to take in. So what can our listeners actually do, with all of these changes and challenges happening around us?
I think the most important thing is to be an informed user. Understand what's changing on the platforms you use and think about how those changes might affect you.
Don't be afraid to try out those new features either.
Mm-hmm.
Experiment a little, make some videos, rearrange your Instagram.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, really think about the role that social media plays in your life and, what values you want to support. Are you okay with how they handle your data? Do you agree with their content moderation policies?
These are all really good questions to ask yourself as you're using these platforms. It's all about being intentional and making choices that you feel good about.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, things are always changing online, so staying informed and being able to adapt is really important.
Knowledge is power, right? The more you understand these trends, the better you'll be able to use these platforms. Whether you're just scrolling for fun or you're a creator or you're a business, it's easy to just, get caught up in all the new stuff. But I think it's important to actually think about what it means for us,
Yeah.
As individuals.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it makes me think about something that we haven't really touched on yet, which is How are our own habits and preferences changing as these platforms change? Are we, finding ourselves watching more video than we used to? Are we thinking differently about how we present ourselves online? It's kind of a two-way street, right?
Yeah, it's almost like those nature documentaries where they talk about how animals and their environments kind of evolve together.
That's a great analogy. And so, as that continues to happen, it's natural to wonder what's next. What is social media even going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years? It's
Yeah.
hard to say for sure, but if these trends are anything to go by, we can probably expect to see even more video, even more personalized experiences. And I think those lines between entertainment information and commerce are just going to keep getting blurrier.
It's a little bit of a Wild West out there,
Mm.
but this has been a really interesting deep dive. Wouldn't you
Oh,
say?
absolutely. I think we covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the rise of video, all those crazy new ways that brands are trying to reach people, the challenges around DEI, and of course, the whole question mark around TikTok's future.
And most importantly, we've encouraged all of you listening to really be a part of this and to be informed and to think critically about it all.
Social media is so powerful, and I think it really is up to each of us to use it in a way that feels good and that we feel good about.
Well said. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the world of social media. Hopefully you learned something new today, and maybe you'll even see these platforms a little bit differently now. Until next time.